Hello, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching Eagle News International.
And I'm CJ Hero. Welcome to the program. On tonight's headlines.
President Joe Biden orders flags lowered to half-mast after the U.S. crosses the heartbreaking milestone of 500,000 COVID-19 deaths.
Myanmar's military leaders come under renewed pressure at home and abroad with tightened sanctions from the EU and the U.S. and some of the biggest demonstrations against their rule since they seized power 3 weeks ago.
Facebook says it will lift its contentious ban on Australian news pages after the government agreed to amend a world-first media law, fiercely opposed by the tech giant.
And the U.S. space agency NASA on Monday released the first audio from Mars, a faint crackling recording of a gust of wind captured by the Perseverance rover. NASA also released the first video of last week's landing of the rover.
There's no plumes or no visible smoke or anything else coming out of the rockets at the corner of the...
And first to the U.S., President Joe Biden ordered flags lowered to half-mast after the United States crossed the heartbreaking milestone of 500,000 COVID-19 deaths, while Britain eyed lifting lockdowns in the latest sign of global gains against the pandemic. Let's listen in.
Today we mark a truly grim, heartbreaking milestone. 500,071 dead. That's more Americans who have died in 1 year in this pandemic than in World War I, World War II, and the Vietnam War combined. That's more lives lost to this virus than any other nation on earth. But as we acknowledge the scale of this mass death in America, we remember each person and the life they lived. And it seems unbelievable, but I promise you, the day will come when the memory of the loved one you lost will bring a smile to your lips before a tear to your eye. It will come, I promise you. My prayer for you, though, is that day will come sooner rather than later. And that's when you know you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay.
President Biden, accompanied by his wife Jill and Vice President Kamala Harris and her husband, Doug Emhoff, then stood outside the White House to mark a moment's silence in front of 500 candles representing the toll, the highest reported of any country. Earlier, flags were lowered over the White House and at federal buildings nationwide, as well as at embassies around the world. President Biden has warned that the U.S. toll could still go well over 600,000. But signs are also emerging that progress is being made both in the U.S. and around the world, with infections dropping sharply and vaccine deliveries rising steadily.
The head of the World Health Organization appealed to wealthy countries not to buy a bulk of COVID-19 vaccines before poor nations get any. He said funds are available for or to help needy countries to purchase vaccines, but that is not enough. Let's listen in.
Some high-income countries who are actually approaching manufacturers to secure more vaccines, which is affecting the deals with COVAX, and even the amount that was allocated for COVAX was reduced because of this. We can only have vaccines delivered to the countries who are members of the COVAX if the high-income countries cooperate in respecting the deals that COVAX did.
We have an extraordinary challenge, and the challenge is that clearly we need to get vaccines produced and distributed in an equitable way, not only in the United States, because it is clear that each country must take care of their own, but also the equitable distribution, as mentioned by Dr. Tedros, of vaccines, so that we realize that this is a global pandemic requiring a global response. The best way to have sustainable capability of being able to respond to outbreaks, not only the outbreak of COVID-19, but also the inevitable outbreaks that will also occur in the future, is to build capacity within country that's sustainable.
For those who have the technology, manufacturers or the academic labs, to share with companies, production sites in different countries around the world to actually do that technology transfer and to build the capacity, especially with the new platform technologies that can be very quickly adapted to deal with other pathogens. WHO set up a mechanism, the COVID technology access pool, which can facilitate the tech transfer. And so I hope that we will see a growing interest in this, because I think it will only help everyone.
A successful global vaccination campaign is considered to be key to stemming the pandemic. European nations have given financial support to the unbacked COVAX scheme, which aims to get vaccines to the world's most vulnerable people, and are considering sharing some of their own doses, though they have not specified when.
Let's head on over to Japan, where at least 3 prefectures want to lift the state of emergency earlier than the scheduled March 7. Here's Dennis Liu for an update. Dennis?
Yes, Alma, good evening. 3 Japanese prefectures of Kyoto, Osaka, and Hyogo are set to ask the central government to lift a state of emergency over the coronavirus pandemic at the end of the month. The emergency is supposed to end on March 7th. The state of emergency, Japan's second on the pandemic, was initially declared on January 7th for 1 month, covering 11 prefectures that also include Tokyo and its nearby prefectures. It was later extended through March 7 for 10 of the prefectures. Japan's virus measures are limited, with bars and restaurants requested but not obliged to close by 8 p.m. while working from home is strongly recommended. There are no blanket stay-at-home orders. Kyoto Governor Takatoshi Nishiwaki said that even if the state of emergency is lifted, the prefecture would continue to ask restaurants and bars to shorten business hours. Osaka Governor Hirofumi Yoshimura said his prefecture would discuss coordinated antivirus measures with neighboring Kyoto and Hyogo prefectures Tuesday before filing their official requests. Tokyo, which remains the hardest hit of Japan's 47 prefectures, has seen a decrease in new cases, with 178 reported Monday, the first time the count has fallen below 200 since November 24th last year. The tally lifted the Japanese capital's cumulative cases to 109,912. The rate of infectious disease among elderly people considered at a higher risk of developing severe symptoms has been rising. However, with daily deaths in the capital often totaling double digits. Alma?
All right, thank you very much, Dennis. And we're eager to hear more updates there in Japan. Thank you for your updates.
Alma, thank you very much. Reporting from Tokyo, Japan, this is Dennis Liu. We live in interesting times.
Now, a study from the UK says or shows vaccines against COVID-19 are effective in cutting disease transmission and hospitalizations from the first dose. We have details of this story from Eribel Celestino of our ABC UK Bureau. Eribel.
Hi, CJ, and yes, data from 2 separate studies published in the UK on Monday, one in England and another in Scotland, have shown vaccines against COVID-19 are effective in cutting disease transmission and hospitalization from the first dose. Analysis from Public Health England has shown the vaccine manufactured by Pfizer-BioNTech reduces the risk of catching infection by more than 70% after first dose. that risk is reduced by 85% after a second dose. Hospitalization and death from COVID-19 is reduced by over 75% in those who have received a dose of Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, according to the analysis. Health Secretary Matt Hancock said that it is very encouraging to see evidence that the Pfizer vaccine offers a high degree of protection against coronavirus. Dr. Mary Ramsay, head of immunization at Public Health England, said that much more data will be shown over the coming weeks, and we should be encouraged by these initial findings. As you know, CJ, Britain is one of the worst hit countries by the COVID-19 pandemic, with 120,757 deaths. It was the first nation to begin mass vaccinations in December, and more than 17 million people have now received at least a first vaccine dose, 1/3 of the UK's adult population. Well, at the same time, a study in Scotland led by the University of Edinburgh found that by the 4th week after receiving the initial dose, the Pfizer vaccine reduced the risk of hospitalization from COVID up to 85%. The Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine reduced the risk by 94%. Professor Aziz Sheikh, who led the research, said that we now have national evidence across an entire country that vaccination provides protection against COVID-19 hospitalizations, and that the rollout of the first vaccine dose needs to be accelerated globally to help overcome this disease. It found that vaccination was associated with an 81% reduction in hospitalization risk in the 4th week among those aged 80 years and over when the results for both vaccines were combined. Back to you, CJ.
Well, thank you so much, Aribel. Those figures are very significant, and hopefully that helps encourage the citizens there to get vaccinated, and that, news of this report reduces fears among the citizens. Please do take care over there, Aribel.
Thank you so much, CJ, for having me. Stay safe. Reporting from the United Kingdom, I am Aribel Celestino. We live in interesting times.
The city of Corpus Christi partners with local groups and companies to reach out to those impacted by an unprecedented winter storm that hit the state of Texas in recent days. The ice storm left millions of Texans without power and heat, and tens of thousands without water and food. Bureau Chief Kathleen Gregorio with this story.
It's a sunny day here in Corpus Christi, Texas. At 70 degrees, you would never have thought that just a few days ago this entire region was covered with ice. Unfortunately, the recent winter storms have left the city with power outages that led to pipe bursts, as well as an interruption in the distribution system of basic necessities such as water, groceries, dairy products. And today, the city, working in conjunction with local businesses such as the Stripes organization, have teamed up to supply water or free water to local residents as one of the many good deeds that are taking place throughout the community, where organizations team up to lift one another up.
It's been a really tough past couple of days. The state of Texas was not prepared for an Arctic freeze that came through, and we're resilient people, and we've got a great community here. I've heard firsthand of stories where neighbors are helping neighbors. The business community has stepped up and offered not only food but places to stay for warmth, places to charge your devices, because power was out for many of us, including myself. Really good to see the people of this community step up. I know for the city of Corpus Christi, we worked with our emergency operations center to open up the 2 FEMA domes that we have here in the city up as temporary shelters for people to come in, stay the night for however many nights they needed to. Food was given to them, and just a place for them to stay out of the freezing weather. The city also also open up our senior centers as warming centers for people to come in, just get out of your cold house, charge your devices, get something to eat, and just as a reprieve for the cold that hit all of us.
Tell us what's going on.
Sure. Stripe Stores is coming together for our community in the Coastal Bend. We wanted to supply water for those that were without due to the water boil, and of course the power outages in the community. This is water from our company. We've actually served over 250 cars in under an hour, and we are available to serve over 600 cars. Stripes has always been really good about giving back to our customers where we work and live. We are glad to continue to do that, and we're happy to be open. We're glad that our stores are all open, and we're able to continue to get what we need in our stores. Our vendors have been very great about that. We have the support from our police officers that are here to help with trafficking, and we also have the mayor here who's busy handing out water to all of her community.
Hello everyone, my name is Mayor Paulette Guajardo here in Corpus Christi, Texas. And today we are partnering, Stripes actually, our Stripes Laredo company, taco company is partnering with City of Corpus Christi to serve our residents here, providing much needed water. We're here for the last week. We had an unprecedented event happen, something that hasn't happened in over 126 years. We had our temperatures drop. We were in the 20s, so it was unbelievable. It was an unprecedented time on top of the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, and then the city fell into a water boil alongside 800 other public water systems that affected 13.1 million people in Texas. So that many people were going through a water boil just like us. So the water was an extremely difficult commodity to attain until yesterday when the city did our water distribution, and thankfully Stripes is doing theirs today because there is still a great need. We've got lines running all the way back down to the freeway or up the freeway. There's a lot of people in need of water. We had a water drive yesterday that served thousands, but as you can see today, there was a line well before 3 p.m., which is when it started here. And I can't speak highly enough about our partnership, because this is what it takes to work together and make things happen. These partnerships are golden, and this one in particular I have worked with for the last 4.5 years, so we're very, very grateful today. And President Biden just approved a major disaster declaration for Texas. We're very blessed because there were only 77 counties that were included in this declaration, and Nueces County was one of them. So I'd like to encourage everyone to go to www.disasterassistance.gov to apply these funds that are critical aid for you and for whatever damages you may have. You can also call a FEMA disaster assistance hotline at 1-800-621-3362. And of course, our website at cityofcorpuschristi.com. Those are different ways, those are very important ways where you can find assistance of some sort. But locally, if you go to the City of Corpus Christi's website, we've got many ways that you can reach out to agencies that can help.
I'm really thankful for the business community, the small business community. Really thankful for the people of the city that have reached out, and we're helping each other. So it's a good thing.
Thank you. Thank you so much. In Corpus Christi, Texas, I'm Jane Kathleen Gregorio, Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
In other news, the United States on Monday announced sanctions against 2 more leaders of Myanmar's junta and warned of further action as hundreds of thousands defiantly rallied for the restoration of the nation's democracy. The United States said it was blocking any U.S. property and suspending the entry into the country of 2 members of the newly ruling State Administrative Council, General Maung Maung Kyaw, who commands the Air Force, and Lieutenant General Mo Mint Tun. The junta has warned it is willing to use lethal force to crush the increasingly large demonstrations after protesters were shot dead over the weekend. The United States has already imposed sanctions on other top figures, including Senior General Min Aung Hlaing, the military chief and the ruler of the country. Watch this.
Authorities against the Burmese people, including peaceful protesters, and we urge the Burmese military to exercise restraint. Over the weekend, millions of Burmese took to the streets to show the strength of their will and the power of their collective voice. We stand with the people of Burma. We call on the Burmese military to act peacefully and with respect for the rule of law and human rights, including the freedoms of expression and peaceful assembly. We stand with the people of Burma and support the freedom of peaceful assembly, including to protest peacefully in support of the democratically elected government.
Now, that announcement comes hours after the European Union also approved sanctions on the Myanmar's military, stepping up international pressure over the February 1 coup in which the generals toppled Democratic leader Aung San Suu Kyi. Let's listen in.
Today, we have decided a set of targeted measures with ministers in response to these events. When we took the political agreement to apply sanctions targeting the military responsible for the coup and the economic interest. All direct financial support from our development assistance to the government's reform programs is withheld.
The EU said it will continue to provide humanitarian assistance and will seek to avoid measures that could adversely affect the people of Myanmar, especially those people who are in the most vulnerable circumstances.
Now, 9 women suspected of plotting to blow up military targets in the restive southern Philippines have been arrested, according to the army. Security forces detained the women and seized bomb-making equipment during raids on Friday of several homes on Muslim-majority Jolo Island, a stronghold of the Islamic State-linked Abu Sayyaf group. Most of the women were the daughters or widows of slain Abu Sayyaf fighters and included several potential suicide bombers, according to Major General William Gonzalez. This is how desperate the remaining terrorists are, willing to sacrifice their families just to get back at government forces, according to Gonzalez. The women had been monitored, giving financial or logistical support to their relatives in Abu Sayyaf. First Lieutenant Jerica Manongdo told AFP they allegedly planned to attack soldiers with improvised explosive devices. 3 of the women are the daughters of the late Abu Sayyaf leader Hatib Hajan Sawadjaan, who was accused of planning the deadly attack on Jolo Cathedral in 2019, which killed 21 people. Their arrest comes 6 months after a pair of female suicide bombers, including an Indonesian, blew themselves up on Jolo, killing 15 people and wounding 74 others. It was the country's deadliest attack last year.
In other news, Malaysia deported over 1,000 Myanmar nationals back to their homeland just weeks after a coup, according to the country's immigration chief, despite a court order halting the repatriation and a storm of criticism from rights groups. Malaysian immigration chief Khairul Zaimi Daud said authorities sent back 1,086 detainees on 3 Myanmar Navy ships from a military base on Malaysia's west coast. However, he said all of those who have been deported agreed to return on their own free will without being forced. The statement made no mention of a ruling from the Kuala Lumpur High Court just hours earlier ordering that the repatriation be halted so that rights groups could present a challenge arguing for the repatriation to be stopped. Activists have raised concerns there are asylum seekers among those being deported, while the United States and the UN had also criticized the plan.
Back here in the Philippines, Malacanang said President Duterte has refused to place the entire Philippines under the least restrictive modified general community quarantine, or MGCQ, until after the government kicks off its vaccination drive. Watch this.
Na-announce na po kagabi na ang direktiba ng Presidente ay i-hold muna ito hanggang magsimula ang pagbabakuna ng ating mga kababayan, lalo na ang ating mga essential health workers. Again, the President and the government recognizes the urgency of reopening the economy so we can resume the pre-pandemic upward trajectory and sustained growth of the economy. This, however, should be done side by side with measures that will ensure that we do not compromise efforts to contain COVID-19. And this includes the vaccination of those manning the front lines of our battle against this disease. Ang importante ngayon ay tuloy-tuloy po ang iba pang hakbang para matugunan ang mga economic concerns habang hinahanda ang pag-roll out ng mga bakuna.
In Canada, Toronto announced its request to extend its stay-at-home order to March. Eagle News correspondent Ashley Sakmar has the details.
Officials from the City of Toronto, Canada have announced Thursday the request to extend the city's stay-at-home order until at least March 9th. Details were given by Mayor John Tory. Take a look.
Today, Dr. Davila will be detailing her professional public health advice, which has been provided to the province, recommending extending the lockdown in Toronto for an additional 2 weeks. This is based on public health's significant concern around the new COVID-19 variants that we are starting to see in settings across our city. Confirmed cases of the variants have turned up in long-term care, hospitals, one shelter, and in a meatpacking plant, for some examples.
Dr. Eileen Davila, Toronto's Medical Officer of Health, also reported the number of variant of concern cases in the city.
There are 56 confirmed variant of concern cases in Toronto. 54 are the UK variant B117, and 2 are Brazilian variants. A week ago, there were 33 confirmed cases of COVID-19 variants in Toronto. 283 cases from Toronto that have screened positive as variants of concern. We will be in a third wave, as bad as anything we've been through thus far.
The discussed variant of concern is a mutation of the COVID-19 virus, or the SARS-CoV-2 genome. The variants are reported to spread more easily and is suspected to affect the COVID-19 vaccine's efficacy. The new variants are also linked to higher risks of hospitalization and death. To ensure the public is informed on the new variant of concern cases, the City of Toronto will now upload new data on its COVID-19 status of cases in Toronto dashboard, giving more insight on the new variant, specified down to the type, source of infection, and the case counts based on gender, severity, and age. Dr. Davila and Mayor Tory emphasized that Torontonians must continue to follow all public health measures to ensure the city does not fall under a third wave.
But here's the good news. This is really important, and I agree with the observation of the provincial science table. Public health measures appear to be effective against variants, as are aggressive vaccination and sticking with stay-at-home orders.
I support Dr. Davila's recommendations for the City of Toronto because I believe we have to do everything we can to avoid a third wave.
In Toronto, Canada, Ashley Sakmar, Eagle News, we live in interesting times.
Thanks, Ashley. Eagle News will be right back. Stay tuned.
This portion is brought to you by Canriv Corporation, your ventilation and air conditioning specialist. Services offered: supply and installation of elevators, escalators, air conditioners, ventilators, jet towel, hand dryers, generators, access control system, factory automation, and modernization. For more info, please contact Ami Kanke at 0915-263-7198 or 0998-900-3224.
Events happen around us all the time, in our community, in our country, around the world. Events that affect people, move communities, or simply inspire us. Interesting events that people need to know. In these interesting times, we continue to be a competent partner in delivering news about these events. Fast, accurate, balanced, eagle news, because we live in interesting times.
Welcome back to the news. NASA has released the first video of last week's landing of the rover on Mars, which is on a mission to search for signs of past life on the red planet. Thomas Zuberkin, NASA's Associate Administrator for Science, said the video of Perseverance's descent is the closest you can get to landing on Mars without putting on a pressure suit. Let's listen in.
Of Mars. We have started our constant velocity accordion, which means we are conducting the sky crane, about to conduct the sky crane maneuver. Sky crane maneuver has started, about 20 meters off the surface.
We're getting signals from MRO. Tango Delta.
Touchdown confirmed. Perseverance safely on the surface of Mars, ready to begin seeking the sand.
The EDLCam system successfully captured some amazing imagery of the vehicle's descent and landing on the surface of Mars. We collected a little over 30 gigabytes of information and over 23,000 images of the vehicle descending down to the surface of Mars.
So that inflation really looks textbook. It's nice and symmetric. The parachute opens in only about 0.7 of a second, again, really fast. There's no evidence of tangling of the lines, which is great. There's about 2 miles of lines in the parachute system, so the fact that we don't see any evidence of tangling or any kind of other misbehavior is great news. So pausing here, the first thing that most people will probably notice is that there's no plumes or no visible smoke or anything else coming out of the rockets at the corner of the descent stage. That's expected. Hydrazine isn't a combustion reaction when we burn it. The exhaust products are nitrogen and hydrogen, which are clear. So we expect the plumes to be clear. That's what we see in tests here on Earth.
This image is actually in low resolution mode, so it's 1/4 of the full resolution of the camera. So it's been shrunk down. But you can see right there the vista that we're seeing. This is the rover, obviously, on Mars, and you can see some of the material that landed on the deck. But everything looks in good shape, and so we're using these images to inspect.
And the HiRISE team was able to find our hardware on the surface of Mars. And so if you see in this image, if the next pop-up, you can see that we have the descent stage, the parachute, and the heat shield all here in this image. With a few stats here, the descent stage is about 700 meters away from where Perseverance is on the surface. Parachute is about 1.2 kilometers, and the heat shield about 1.5 kilometers.
Finally, I just want to briefly point out that we are finding real science value in these EDLCam videos. Here you can see a beautiful new perspective on the Jezero Delta, and if we can get the next image, also a new perspective on some of the beautiful stratigraphy around our landing site, which is up near on the far right side of this image.
Perseverance was launched on July 30, 2020 and landed on the surface of Mars on Thursday. Its prime mission will last just over 2 years, but it is likely to remain operational well beyond that. Its predecessor, Curiosity, is still functioning 8 years after landing on Mars. Over the coming years, Perseverance will attempt to collect 30 rock and soil samples in sealed tubes to be sent back to Earth sometime in the 2030s for lab analyses.
And more space news. NASA also released the first audio from Mars. Take a look. It's a faint crackling recording of a gust of wind captured by the Perseverance rover. Now, Mars was warmer and wetter in its distant past, and while previous exploration has determined that the planet was habitable, Perseverance is tasked with determining now whether it was actually inhabited. It will begin drilling its first samples in summer, and along the way it will deploy new instruments to scan for organic matter, map chemical composition, and zap rocks with a laser to study the vapor. One experiment involves an instrument that can convert oxygen from Mars' primarily carbon dioxide atmosphere, much like a plant. And the idea is that humans eventually won't need to carry their own oxygen on hypothetical future trips, which is crucial for rocket fuel as well as for breathing.
In other news, Facebook moved to lift a contentious ban on Australian news Tuesday after a last-gasp deal on landmark rules requiring tech giants to pay media companies. Australia's Treasurer Josh Frydenberg announced a face-saving compromise that will see Google and Facebook plunge tens of millions of dollars into the struggling local news sector. Let's listen in.
Well, Facebook has refriended Australia, and Australian news will be restored to the Facebook platform. And Facebook has committed to entering into good faith negotiations with Australian news media businesses in seeking to reach agreements to pay for content. This follows a series of intensive negotiations with Facebook. I want to thank Mark Zuckerberg for the constructive nature of the discussions that we have had over the course of recent days. It's been a difficult process, but these are really important issues. These are important issues because the purpose of the code and the purpose of the Morrison government's intentions of all along have been designed to sustain public interest journalism in this country.
The U.S. digital firms will, for now, avoid being subjected to mandatory payments that could cost them vastly more and create what they see as an alarming global prescient. The social media firm sparked a global outrage last week by blacking out news for its Australian users and inadvertently blocking a series of non-news Facebook pages linked to everything from cancer charities to emergency response services. Prime Minister Scott Morrison had angrily accused Facebook of making a decision to unfriend Australia. Facebook had initially said being forced to pay for news was simply not worth it and shut down content.
Associate Professor at the University of New South Wales Business School, Rob Nichols, said the amendments to the bill effectively allow both parties to walk away happily, adding that Facebook had to compromise after a poorly executed ban on news content damaged their reputation among advertisers. Let's listen in.
But there are things that mean that Facebook can say, oh, well, we got some changes made at the last minute. The government can say, well, the changes weren't so significant that the effect of the legislation has changed, and everybody can walk away saying, well, we got what we wanted. So it's a reasonable compromise which won't actually affect things dramatically at the end of the day. I think some of this is a compromise that Facebook had to make. As soon as you start to see ministers saying, well, our departments will no longer advertise, and large corporates being asked the question, well, can you ethically advertise on Facebook anymore? The major driver of Facebook, which isn't users, it's advertising, suddenly becomes critical. And for a company which prides itself on its software smarts, it was so indiscriminate. Not being able to tell the difference between Channel 9 and the weather, or between Channel 7 and the cancer charity was pretty poor. I think Facebook's damaged its reputation. It's damaged its reputation amongst advertisers. And at the same time, the alternative platform, Google, has actually, well, did the right thing. It came up and did a whole bunch of commercial deals at the last minute. Will it save regional journalism, particularly newspapers in regional centres? I'm not sure. But will it ensure that there is a vibrant news industry? Well, it will provide at least a bit more certainty and a few more journalist jobs in Australia, or at least the continuity of those jobs in Australia. And that can't be a bad thing.
U.S. authorities arrested the wife of jailed Mexican drug lord Joaquin El Chapo Guzman on Monday at an airport outside of Washington on narcotics smuggling charges, according to the Justice Department. Emma Coronel Aispuro, 31 years old, faces one charge of conspiracy to traffic cocaine, methamphetamine, heroin and marijuana for importation into the United States, according to the department. She was arrested at Dulles Airport or International Airport. Guzman was the leader of the Sinaloa cartel, one of Mexico's most notorious drug trafficking groups. He ran an operation that delivered hundreds of tons of narcotics into the United States and was behind multiple murders of those who crossed him, according to court filings.
Staying in the U.S., U.S. President Joe Biden's Attorney General nominee, Judge Merrick Garland, arrived to testify before the Senate Judiciary Committee on Capitol Hill. Take a look. He also grew emotional when asked about confronting hate and racism. His own grandparents fled anti-Semitism in Europe. Merrick Garland, or Judge Merrick Garland, said his first priority, if he's confirmed, will be the probe into the January 6 Capitol insurrection.
Communities of color and other minorities still face discrimination in housing, in education, in employment, and in the criminal justice system. And they bear the brunt of the harm caused by pandemic, pollution, and climate change. If confirmed, I will supervise the prosecution of white supremacists and others who stormed the Capitol on January 6th.
In other news, Hong Kong announced plans Tuesday to ramp up the ideological vetting of politicians and officials, with anyone seen to be disloyal to China or a national security threat barred from office. The draft law will be sent next month to the city's legislature, a body now devoid of opposition after a number of figures were disqualified because their political views were deemed a security threat. Officials have detailed a negative list of offenses that could see their colleagues removed from office, including acts that endanger national security, advocating for independence, or refusing to accept China's sovereignty over Hong Kong. The city's Secretary for Constitutional and Mainland Affairs, Eric Tsang, confirmed that criticism of the Chinese Communist Party could also be a disqualifying factor. China has ushered in a sweeping crackdown against critics in Hong Kong after huge and often violent pro-democracy protests rocked the financial hub in 2019.
And before we go on a break, a man in China scaled a utility pole to do sit-ups. Off the top of it, stunning onlookers and causing a power cut to thousands of homes, according to media. Take a look. This unnamed man was taken away by police following his antics on Sunday evening on the outskirts of the southwestern city of Chengdu. It published a video on the Twitter-like Weibo showing the man suspended about 10 meters or 30 feet up in the air as he did a stomach crunch off the top of the pylon. Emergency services, including medical personnel, rushed to the scene, according to the paper in Shanghai. Now, it wasn't clear why the man decided to do sit-ups off the pole, but state media warned against anyone copying him. The incident was a hot topic on Chinese social media, with at least 1.7 million views of one hashtag relating to it. Another on Weibo did not find it so funny. He said blackouts can waste a lot of money and potentially lead to a fatal accident. Now, local police were unavailable for comment.
That is a very dangerous time.
Must be the lockdown.
Must be the
Must be the
lockdown.
pandemic.
Egan Lewis will be right back. Don't go away.
This portion is brought to you by Hubert, an expert in air conditioning and electromechanical, also engaged in structural, electrical, fire protection, plumbing, and sanitary services. Hubert, your ultimate MAPS air conditioning solutions.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Welcome back to the news. Rescuers successfully refloated 28 pilot whales stranded on a notorious stretch of New Zealand's coast Tuesday, but the mammals remained close to shore and could beach themselves again. The Department of Conservation, or DOC, said the long-finned pilot whales were part of a pod of around 50 found Monday at Farewell Spit, about 90 kilometers or 55 miles north of the South Island tourist town of Nelson. Around 40 were pushed out to sea on Monday evening, but swam back ashore by the next morning, with around 60 volunteers helping move the 28 survivors back into the water. At least 15 of the original pod have died. Farewell Spit is a 26-kilometer hook of sand that protrudes into the sea at Golden Bay. It has been the scene of at least 10 pilot whale strandings in the past 15 years. The most recent was February 2017, when almost 700 of the mammals beached, resulting in 250 deaths. Scientists are unclear about why the beach is so deadly. One theory is that the spit creates a shallow seabed in the bay that interferes with the whale's sonar navigation systems.
Can everyone come back?
In other environment news, 10 orangutans have been airlifted back to their natural habitat on Indonesia's Borneo Island in the first release of the apes into the wild for a year due to the dangers of coronavirus infection. A group of 10 apes shuttled inside transport cages encased in netting took to the air this month to avoid days-long land and sea routes that could expose them to COVID-19. Take a look.
orangutan terjangkit COVID-19 adalah dengan cara melihat gejala klinis dari orangutan tersebut. Apabila orangutan menunjukkan gejala pernapasan, bisa jadi dia terinfeksi dari COVID-19. Serta jika salah satu karyawan dinyatakan positif COVID-19, maka akan dilakukan tracing terhadap orangutan yang berkontak erat terhadap karyawan tersebut.
President Duterte is expected to visit areas hit by Typhoon Auring in the Caraga region on Tuesday to see firsthand the damage caused by the tropical storm. Cabinet Secretary Carlo Nograles said Duterte will visit Caraga, accompanied by some cabinet members, to issue directives on what has to be done to respond to the needs of the residents there. Let's listen in.
As of yesterday, it was reported that 29,008 families or 112,734 individuals have been affected by the typhoon. Thankfully, we do not have any casualties as of the moment. A total of 18,996 families or 69,682 individuals have been evacuated, and financial assistance has been extended to all those affected, especially to our fellow Mindanaoans in Surigao del Sur. Rest assured, government continues to closely monitor the situation, and preparedness and response measures are already in place. Ngayong araw, nakatakdang bisitahin ni Pangulong Duterte ang mga nasalantang lugar para makita firsthand ang damage na dulot ng bagyong ito.
He also assured that local government units and concerned agencies have been responding to the situation in the region. Nograles also hailed ongoing relief, rescue, and response operations being conducted in affected areas. Reports showed that Tandag River in Surigao del Sur swelled amid the onslaught of Auring, which caused flooding in parts of the province. The flood waters were at least knee-deep in the communities with higher elevation. Financial assistance have been extended to all those affected.
In a bid to further boost the pork supply in the country, the government is considering granting a 50% insurance subsidy for commercial hog raisers, according to Cabinet Secretary Carlo Nograles. The proposal was pitched during a cabinet meeting led by President Duterte. Nograles said in a virtual press conference. Let's listen in.
Isa po dito ang karagdagang support para sa ating mga hog raisers para matugunan ang kakulangan ng supply ng pork sa merkado. One proposal being studied is an insurance subsidy of 50% for commercial hog raisers that will utilize the Quick Response Fund under the QRF of the Department of Agriculture. This is just one initiative being considered to help our hog farmers increase supplies. Another initiative that was discussed yesterday was the 2021 to 2022 National Employment Recovery Strategy, or NERS, or NERS. As most of you already know, like the rest of the world, the country's employment was hit hard by the pandemic. Unemployment peaked last April at 17.6%, or an equivalent of 7.2 million Filipinos. And while we were able to halve that to 8.7% by October of 2020, we recognize that a coherent national strategy can help create a policy environment that encourages generation of more employment and entrepreneurship opportunities. It will improve employability and productivity of our workers, and it will provide support to existing and emerging businesses.
Metal fatigue has emerged as chief suspect in the spectacular engine failure on a United Airlines plane, which scattered debris over suburban Denver and led to dozens of Boeing 777 aircraft being grounded worldwide. Watch this. The Hawaii-bound flight, which quickly returned to the airport after part of the engine caught fire and broke off, prompted United and other airlines to ground planes with the same Pratt & Whitney engine. While no one was injured in the Denver incident, the episode is the latest setback for Boeing, which only recently resumed deliveries of the long-grounded 737 MAX following 2 fatal crashes of that plane. Boeing said all 128 of the 777s with Pratt & Whitney engines were grounded following Saturday's emergency landing of United Flight 328. Of the 128 planes, only 69 were in service while 59 were in storage. Besides United, which removed 24 planes from service, affected airlines included Japanese carriers, Japan Airlines and All Nippon, and South Korea's Asiana and Korean Air.
And finally, in our news, one of the era's defining dance floor acts hung up their helmets on Monday as electronic music stars Daft Punk announced their retirement in typically enigmatic fashion, with a video showing one of them exploding in a desert. Let's take a look.
Je trouve que c'est dommage parce que c'était un groupe qui, tu vois, qui plaisait à beaucoup de monde. Maintenant, après, il faut l'accepter, hein, c'est la vie. Hein, voilà, hein, je veux dire, c'est eux qui décident, c'est des êtres humains, on peut pas décider à leur place. Voilà. Mais c'est dommage parce que ça plaisait à beaucoup de gens. Moi, Daft Punk, c'est des précurseurs à l'époque de tout ce qui est un peu disco house, tu vois, des trucs un peu clubbing, etc. Et bon, je les ai connus à l'époque quand c'était des petits jeunes qui venaient ici sans casque, hein, voilà. Et à l'époque, ils avaient même fait de la techno vers les tout débuts, tu vois, avec des morceaux techno en vinyle qui marchaient très bien.
So sad. 28 years? Has it been 28 years?
Yeah, well, they will be wearing a different kind of mask now with the pandemic.
That's true.
And, you know, young artists draw inspiration from their music style. So we're all going to be missing them. That's it for tonight's broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I am CJ Hero. See you again tomorrow.
We'll see you back tomorrow. At the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. I'm Alma Angeles, and we live in interesting times.